So why did you start writing poetry?
I think the reason I started is writing poetry is the same as for anyone who writes poetry, in that it gives one a certain voice, a way of articulating. I have a brain that has a lot of things rattling around in there, a lot of strange thoughts that if you try and articulate that in normal conversation, it's quite difficult to find a thread. And if you then put that on paper, you're then able to order those thoughts and come up with something that makes sense and is acceptable and interesting.
What sort of things do you write about?
I tend to write about personal experience, things that I've done. I've written a reflective type of piece about that without being too nostalgic. There's always a danger of being overly nostalgic, and that bores people. I've written about things that I know about, that I'm interested in. So it may not be personal experience, some of these things, but I've written about nonsense, which is fun. Just make up stuff. You start with an idea and then you build on that, which creates some original piece of rubbish, you might call it. But
what are your current goals writing poetry?
well, the only goal was to try and write 50 poems in my 59th year before I got to 60. I've got 40 poems and I've only got 3 days left, so I think I'll give up on that goal. But it's to keep writing and to win a few poetry prizes. I've had one poem published in the Wagga Wagga Writers Annual. That was quite good, but having done that, I think I can do better.
I think probably the most successful thing about my video interview portrait was the amount of shooting and variety of shots I was able to get during the shooting process. Because I was interviewing a family member, there was obviously an informality and easiness on set, and no need for more formal and rigorous scheduling and planning that would have been required for a different interviewee, or for somebody who I wasn't staying with at the time. I filmed a lot of cutaway shots and establishing shots, too many to put in the final project, and asked multiple questions from different angles, medium close-up, and close-up. Editing it all together then was a matter of condensing a significant amount of good material, rather than stretching for time. Because that familiarity also existed, I knew which questions specifically to ask, like about his goals, in order to get an interesting answer. The most problematic and least successful aspect of the shoot was some of the technical difficulty that I had. There was one shot in particular that was unusable because it was out of focus, but more significantly, the microphone I was originally going to record with wasn't cooperating, so I had to replace it with a handheld microphone for the interviewee to grasp as they spoke. The final mix of the interview includes both audio from the camera and this microphone, sometimes simultaneously and merged together, and sometimes separated. I was pressed for time trying to get this project done, so it was unfortunately a situation where I didn't have the resources available to fix it then and there. In addition, I also had some sort of illness for most of the week, so that affected my scheduling and also, I guess, my voice. One key learning discovery I made about the creative possibilities of producing interview portraits was about the interviewer's role as an almost adversarial presence, one whose prompts and contributions during a shoot are in service of the content and material, as opposed to perhaps remaining as your true self and acting accordingly during an interview. For instance, Michael Ravages writes about interviewers having to act as witnesses and refrain from intervention during an emotional answer or response, perhaps against their more human instincts. Ravager writes about interviews reaching and exploring emotional thresholds, searching for moments of character development and shock that we more associate with dramatic and scripted art, and that it can be a directorial choice to allow these to play out unobstructed on camera, rather than act as you would without there being a camera and crew there, comfort or talk to them accordingly. These points converge to the general idea of not catching an interviewee when they fall, allow them to work out for themselves what they are willing to divulge and how to handle it. This directly hands-off approach is something I hadn't necessarily considered as a particular choice that interviewers make, and is something that perhaps won't come so naturally to me. One core lesson I learnt in the production process of this interview portrait was just how artificially constructed the final project is, despite its supposed improvised and hands-free nature. Obviously, it's naive to think that an interview like this is completely natural without a guiding hand. Even the mere presence of a camera in the room will alter individual behaviours. But it was surprising just how widespread and all-encompassing the artificial construction of the interview was. Lighting, shot placement, constructing a narrative, interactions with the interviewee, shaping the perspective of their answers, shooting cutaways and establishing shots, the switch from informality to formality on every call of action. Everything has to be planned, set up, and maintained. This work and effort of constructing the frame is something that will be very significant as I continue my journey as a media practitioner, and I think that it's important and that it matters because ultimately people respond to these stylistic decisions and to the ways in which media maintains or subverts their standards. Constructing shots and projects to look a certain way or to not look a certain way will play into perceptions of viewers and supplement the thematic content, in this case what the interview is about.